Continue now as our journey kind of just beginning into Ecclesiastes. And Ecclesiastes is a book that I think, when people ask me, what do you think is one of the most important books of the Bible? Now, I could answer with, John is really important. I mean, the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. If you would ask me, which book do you think is the most practical and maybe the one that's the most useful, especially in evangelism or just dealing with life, I'd have to say Ecclesiastes would jump really high up to that list. I cannot tell you the number of times in conversations, whether it's in counseling or just in hanging out with people or just general teaching or just even conversations with my kids, when ideas from Ecclesiastes come out or come up. It's right there. It is such a relevant and practical book of the Bible, because it brings us face to face with the realities of life. And we talked about that last week. It asks us the big questions that we've always been asking. What is the purpose of it all? Is there a purpose? Why are we here? Why am I here? Study after study has been done on why younger generations leave the church and tend not to come back. And a recurring finding that keeps on coming back every time these studies are done is that one of the biggest reasons for the young people leaving, is that those young people have this perception that they can't ask questions. That to ask questions is somehow bad or wrong. And I've known people who have been raised in church who have left the church, and they've told me that, well, I felt like I couldn't ask questions, or if I had a question, I was told to, well, just believe, just don't even try, just believe, don't ask the questions. But Ecclesiastes brings us right to those big questions. It says it's okay to ask those questions. Those questions are big and they are important. And it takes us to the place where, even if it's uncomfortable, those answers and that truth is found. It brings us right to that. Now, there's a pretty popular book. I read it ages ago. I've read it a couple of times, called Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. It was made into a movie. And in that, they have a great computer is built. The biggest computer ever built in this fictional world. And it's called Deep Thought. And it is built to find the answer to life, the universe, and everything. And it is given this task, and it takes a processing time of 7.5 million years. And after all this time, the people gather there to hear the answer to life, the universe, and everything. And in this big celebration, the computer spits out the answer, and it's 42. And the people are like, we've waited 7.5 million years for this. It can't be 42. And the computer says, I've thought about this quite a bit. I assure you that's the answer. I suspect that the issue is you don't understand the question. And so then they have to retask themselves to build an even bigger, grander computer to compute the question. Because we don't ask the right questions often. And Ecclesiastes helps us with that by directing us to not asking the wrong questions, but asking the right questions, not getting the wrong answers, but seeking the answers where they need to be found. We don't ask the right questions because we don't know where to look. We don't know what to ask. In Ecclesiastes, though, we come to a true and accurate understanding of life, the universe, and everything, with this man, the preacher. He's identified Koheleth in the Hebrew, Solomon. He takes us with him on this spiritual journey to understand that very thing, the answer to life, the universe, and everything. And it takes somewhat less than 7.5 million years, I promise you. And he takes us through that, and we discover this as we go on this journey with him. And he starts that journey here as we read in verses 12. He begins this journey. Last week we looked at him opening this up by declaring that everything is vanity. And we talked about that last week, that this vanity is, everything is breath. That's this word. It's hevel. Everything is breath. It's like a vapor. And I talked about this last week. It's a recurring thing, so I want to mention it again because it is the big word and phrase that comes up over and over in Ecclesiastes, that everything is vanity. It is all, that's how it's usually translated, but it is all breath. It's all a vapor. It is all the same thing as when you go out on a cold morning like today or whatever, and you take a breath and you see your breath go out and it just disappears. That everything under the sun, all that is in this world is just that. It is like a vapor that is seen for a moment, it dissipates. It is not tangible. You can't grab onto it. It has no substance to grab. It has no reality beyond just that thing that we see and it disappears. We can only not only grab it, but it also disappears. It's gone. And so his declaration that everything is vanity, and then he sets this up with the cycle in verses 1 through 11 of the cycle of everything repeating, setting this tone that the world is endlessly repeating, and it is this monotonous and boring place where nothing changes and it's all the same. And then he asks this question to us by saying, in this world of vanity, in this world of breath and vapor and repetition, what's the point? What is there to be gained by mankind in this? Is there a point? Is there something that we get in this? Is there some goal in all of this? What is the reason for life? Which is the big question, right? That is the question. The answer to life, the universe, and everything. What is the point of all of this? And he brings us in verse 12 and through the rest of the book on this journey of discovery to say, let me take you to, let's go find that answer. Let's go find that answer. And so he begins this journey, and we read, starting in verse 12, if you would join me in your insert in your bulletin or in your Bible if you have it with you. In Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verse 12, we read, I, the preacher, have been king over Israel in Jerusalem, and I applied my heart to seek and to search out by wisdom all that is done under heaven. It is an unhappy business that God has given to the children of man to be busy with. I have seen everything that is done under the sun, and behold, all is vanity, and a striving after the wind. What is crooked cannot be made straight, and what is lacking cannot be counted. I said in my heart, I have acquired great wisdom, surpassing all who were over Jerusalem before me, and my heart has had great experience of wisdom and knowledge. And I applied my heart to know wisdom and to know madness and folly, and I perceived that this also is but a striving after wind. For in much wisdom is much vexation, and he who increases knowledge increases sorrow. And so here in verse 12 and following, Ecclesiastes enters this first-person pursuit. We have had this introduction at the opening by telling us that these are the words of the preacher in this introduction. Now this preacher enters into the scene and says, I am the preacher, as it says here. He identifies himself. The Hebrew word is Koheleth. Kohelet, he is this man who is the gatherer, the one who brings the assembly together, the idea of a preacher or a teacher. And he says, I, Kohelet, I, the preacher, have been king over Jerusalem, king over Israel in Jerusalem. He is entering this first person now by bringing this. And he wants to take us through an exploration of life under the sun, which will go from now through the end of chapter 2, and it will continue. But he's going to bring us this, indulging in several of the offerings of this world to see if in them the answer to this question can be found. Can the answer to life, the universe, and everything be found in the things of this world? And he's going to bring us through several of those things. And he's going to start here in verses 12 and 18 through examining wisdom. He's going to tell us about the journey. He's going to point us to wisdom. Is there anything to be found in the pursuit of wisdom? And this kind of breaks down into a few things. He repeats the process here twice. He kind of gives us here in verses 12 and 18 an introduction to himself twice. In verses 13 and 17, he says, I have applied my heart to seek and search out by wisdom. In 17, I have applied my heart to know wisdom. So he kind of introduces the quest twice. He presents to us his qualifications twice in verses 14 and 16. I have seen everything that is done under the sun. In 16, he says, I have acquired great wisdom, surpassing all who were over Jerusalem before me. And so he presents this qualifications of how he's the one who can take us on this journey. He presents to us his findings as well, kind of sprinkled throughout this in verses 13 and 14 and then in 17, where he tells us about this unhappy business that has been given by God to men, and that it is all vanity and a striving after the wind. And then he says in verse 17 the same thing, that he perceives that it is all just a striving after wind. And then he gives us two summaries of Proverbs. He kind of sums it up in two Proverbs. And we can tell that these are Proverbs. Well, if you have your Bible in front of you, you might see that those are kind of set out in a different formatting. But they follow Hebrew poetry in their form. And he gives us these two Proverbs in verse 15 and 18 by telling us that what is crooked cannot be made straight, what is lacking cannot be counted. And then telling us in verse 18 that with the increase, in much wisdom is much vexation, and that the increase of knowledge increases sorrow. And so I'm going to walk through that with you today. We're going to look at this in kind of, it's kind of four parts, but we're going to look at it, they kind of break down into two big parts: the quest and the conclusions of that quest, as he brings us on here. And first, his quest, he tells us here twice that this quest is ultimately the search for the answer. The search for the answer, the why, what is the meaning of life, the universe, and everything else. Why is this? And he specifies under the sun. He says he wants to seek out by wisdom all that is done under heaven. And this is a phrase that we see throughout Ecclesiastes. We have these language, under heaven, under the sun. This is all kind of the same idea. This world that we know and experience right here on earth, this is where we're talking about. He sets the setting in that. And he sets this up. It's a noble quest. He says, I have applied my heart. It's not just, something he's doing kind of off the cuff. He's not telling us, well, I was just kind of scrolling through the internet while the football game was on, and I just kind of, whatever. He's saying, I'm applying my heart to this. I'm giving this my all. With everything that is in me, I'm applying myself to this, to search out, we're told here, to search out, to dig into the problem is the language here that he gives us, to dig into this problem, to try to search it out. I'm going to seek it out. I'm going to find it. If it can be found, I'm going to find it. And not only that this quest isn't just maybe towards some narrow view of what wisdom might be, but even tells us that it's going to be to know wisdom, but also to know madness and folly. This is a broad search. Everything that might be called wisdom, or maybe even the opposite of wisdom, because maybe these people think it's wise, these people think it's folly. I'm going to pursue it all. I'm going to look through everything that might be wisdom, maybe even some stuff that's not right. I'm going to look through it all. I'm going to search everywhere, high and low, across the board, to try to find the answer. I'm going to bring all my faculty to bear. The full spectrum of understanding, to try to find what is the point of all of this. What is the point? And it's by wisdom he does this. And we know that this idea of foolishness and wisdom is something that is often equated with knowing the Lord. So he's going to kind of say in this pursuit of wisdom, but also kind of folly, they're saying that I'm going to look at places that may be outside the church. It would be like me saying I'm going to pursue an answer and saying that I'm going to look everywhere, even outside the church. Because we know in Proverbs 1:7 it says, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And we know in Proverbs 1:29 it says, they hated knowledge and didn't choose to fear the Lord. So this idea of folly and madness isn't so much, I'm going to look to stupid people for wisdom. No, the people who know the Lord, I'm going to look through that channel, but I'm also going to look through every other channel too, even channels that are outside maybe the Orthodox prescribed world. I'm going to look outside the church. I'm going to look outside the nation of Israel, outside that worship. I'm going to look in everything that might be so-called wisdom, high and low, far and wide. And he tells us as well here his credentials on this quest. Because if I said to you, I'm going to go search for the answer to life, the universe, and everything, you might say, okay, sure, but why should I trust anything that you say to me about that? I mean, who are you to do this? And if you said that to me, I'd say, yeah, you're right. I mean, I don't have any special qualifications to do that. But the preacher does have special qualifications. He presents to us a person who, as he says here, I have seen everything done under the sun. I have seen everything. I have not seen everything. Me, this preacher, has not seen everything. This preacher has seen everything. He says, I have seen everything. Now, this is most likely Solomon. I think that there's a big, strong case here that this is Solomon. And it makes sense that Solomon, of all people, would say, I've seen everything. Because Solomon, during his reign, Israel expanded to control almost the known world. He controlled the trade routes coming out of Edom and Arabia, India, Africa, Judea. It sat at the crossroads of the world. Israel is right there, connecting Africa and the Arabian Peninsula and everything that is in India and in the West to Asia Minor and that whole area up there. It is the center of the universe. That's why when they're in bad times, they keep on getting conquered by people, because everyone wants to control this kind of centrally located place there. And Solomon has this great influence over the whole world, such an influence that we can see, we're told in the Bible, that the yearly tribute collected from the nations and regions under his control, we're told, is 666 talents of gold, which, I did the math, is well over 50,000 pounds of gold. That's like, I mean, he's getting everything that's in Fort Knox, he's getting that given to him every single year. He's getting that every single year. He is now, Solomon, still listed as the richest man who ever lived. They have all these lists of people throughout history, looking at the historical records of that. Solomon still tops the list. In 1 Kings 10:14, we're told that he gets 666 talents of gold. And so, which is pretty impressive. I mean, he lived 3,000 years ago. I mean, he's still on that list. But he gives us, I have seen everything under the sun, because everything comes through him. The entire world is at his doorstep. Everybody comes to him. And what's more so, he tells us that he has amassed wisdom beyond everyone else. He says that he is the wisest one who ever lived. I have acquired great wisdom, he tells us in verse 16. And this is no kind of arrogant, bragging statement from him. He says, I have acquired great wisdom, surpassing all who are over Jerusalem before me. And my heart has experienced great wisdom and knowledge. And again, if we were to say such a thing, we'd be like, well, come on, man, check it a little bit, all right? You keep it under control. Don't get a big head. You want to make sure you can walk out the door on the way out. But Solomon has a ground for this, because he is not saying to you, I am so smart because I am awesome, but rather Solomon, we know, Solomon gets his wisdom from God, and his wisdom is world-renowned. We're told in 2 Chronicles 9, 1-2, that the Queen of Sheba heard the fame of Solomon. She came to Jerusalem to test him with hard sayings. Well, that kind of sounds like something that the writer of Ecclesiastes might be tested with, to be tested with hard questions. Having a great retinue and camels bearing spices and very much gold and precious stones. And when she came to Solomon, she told him all that was on her mind. And Solomon answered all of her questions, and there was nothing hidden from Solomon that he could not explain to her. So she comes seeking the answers to life, the universe, and everything. She comes seeking these answers, and Solomon gives them to her. His wisdom is so famous that she comes from the other end of the world to come to him, because his fame had gone that far. And she even says about him in verses 5 and 6 in 2 Chronicles 9, the report was true that I heard in my own land of your words and of your wisdom. But I did not believe those reports, until I came, and my own eyes have seen it. And behold, half the greatness of your wisdom has not told to me. You suppress even that report. This report of his wisdom that got her to come with her whole caravan of riches and gold and wealth, this report of his wisdom being so great, spurred this great journey from her. And she comes and says, listen, your wisdom was even greater than I heard. This wisdom is amazing. In fact, even the Quran gives Solomon a God-given wisdom as being the one who is wisest above all others. His wisdom is unsurpassed. Why? Because it comes from God. Unlike others, unlike worldly wisdom, unlike the wisdom that we might say we have, when he became king, he brought an offering to the Lord and he prayed, and God spoke to him and gave him a vision and said to Solomon, what would you like me to give you? And Solomon, being a young man ruling a kingdom, says to him, give me wisdom to rule these people that you've given me, because I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to rule this great people that you've given me. And in 1 Kings 3, 11-12, God said to him, because you have asked this for wisdom, and have not asked for yourself long life or riches or the life of your enemies, but because you asked for yourself understanding to discern what is right. Behold, I now do according to your word. Behold, I give you a wise and discerning mind, so that none like you has been before you, and none like you shall rise after you. Now the Lord has given to Solomon, saying, I'm going to make you the smartest person who ever lived. Not only whoever lived, but whoever will live. You will be the wisest man on earth, bar none. And so he wants to remind us of this on this quest. He wants to say, listen, this is who I am the guy who was given this wisdom. I have amassed great wisdom. I'm the one who is eminently qualified to bring you on this journey of wisdom and understanding, to seek and to find the answers to life. I'm not just some guy. I'm not just some person you bumped into. I am the one who has been given this. So the quest has been set, the quest to seek and to find by wisdom the ways and the mysteries of the world. The quester has been identified as the one who has surpassing wisdom beyond all others. This man, Solomon, who says, I have this great wisdom. I am eminently and supremely qualified to do this. And he wants us to understand this, that to apply the fullness of human understanding and wisdom to the problem, what's the point? Why am I here? Is there a point? And that he is uniquely qualified to accomplish that task. And so he brings us to that point, and then he leads us into the conclusion by telling us what he concludes. So, what's the answer? What did this great man of wisdom find on this quest? What was the answer to life, the universe, and everything? Could, in the pursuit of wisdom, by applying this great wisdom, could an answer be found? Well, yes, but not the answer that we might want. Because he comes to the conclusion, in verse 13 he says, it is an unhappy business that God has given. This is an unhappy business. We might not want to hear that part. We want to say, there is a point to life, and this is what it is, and it's great, and it's wonderful. But Ecclesiastes isn't that book. Ecclesiastes is a book that is ultimately, it gets a bad rap for being pessimistic. It's not pessimistic. If you know anybody who's a pessimist, they'll probably say the same thing. I'm not a pessimist, I'm a realist. Well, Ecclesiastes isn't pessimistic, it is realistic. And so it doesn't offer us the fairy tale thing, the fairy tale answer. It says, listen, I did apply wisdom. This is the answer. This is what I found. It is an unhappy business that God has given to the children of man to be busy with. And that's his main answer, that the business that we have, the toil at which we toil, it is from God, but it is not a happy thing. And this verse ties right into the fall itself in Genesis 3. It comes right from the fall. Because the bottom line is, we live in a fallen world. That's why the answer can't be happy. That's why it's not a good answer, because we live in a world that is fallen. We live in a world that is under the curse. In Genesis 3:17 through 19, we're told that God in his judgment towards Adam and Eve, to Adam, he says, because you have listened to the voice of your wife and have eaten of the tree which I commanded you, you shall not eat of it. Cursed is the ground because of you, and in pain shall you eat of it all the days of your life. Thorns and thistles it shall bring forth for you, and you shall eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your face you shall eat bread till you return to the ground. For out of it you were taken, for you are dust, and to dust you shall return. This ties right into, this is exactly what Solomon here is telling us. It is an unhappy business that's been given to us, to the sons of men. And it is an unhappy business. That's not good news. That's the fall. But that's the reality of the world we live in. We don't want to look at that. We don't want to look at the world as it is. We want to try to come up with euphemisms. We want to kind of brush that over. We want to put on our rose-colored glasses. We don't anymore, and I've done a few funerals, more than a few now, but we don't go to funerals anymore. We go to celebrations of life. Nobody dies. They simply pass away, or they're not with us anymore. We kind of gloss over these realities. Ecclesiastes says, no, this is the reality. We live in a fallen world. This is the world that we've been given. And it's an unhappy business that we have been given here. But it's not for no reason. The shattering of creation came when the image bearers of God in their relationship with the Creator, brought the entirety of creation into futility. We looked at Romans 8:20, that the entire creation has been brought into futility, has been subjected to futility, under which it groans, waiting for that last day. And it ties to the fall even beyond that, because this language here where it says that this business has been given to the children of man. I was talking with Gail about this. No translation kind of says this the way it's written here in the Hebrew. In the Hebrew it says that this business has been given to the sons of Adam. It's not just the children of man, but this is the sons of Adam. He wants to remind us here that who we are is the children of Adam. We are the children of Adam and Eve. And it is to the children of Adam that this bad business has been given, that this unhappy work has been given. And unfortunately, he doesn't end with that bad news. He goes on to tell us even more bad news. So, sorry. I'm going to get to some positive. I'm going to end on a positive note, I promise. So bear with me. We got to go through the bad to get to the good. But he doesn't end with that bad news. He adds to it. Not only is it a bad business that's been given to you by God, but that bad business is just a striving after the wind. It's a chasing after the wind. This word for striving, it's striving or chasing or feeding on the wind or shepherding the wind. There's a lot of different ways you can take this word, but no matter what, it ends up with meaninglessness. I like the idea of feeding on the wind. I used to have dogs, and they'd stick their head out the car when we were driving, and they'd try to bite the wind out the window as it was rushing in their face. And it's not doing them anything. It's just a stupid little thing that dogs do. He's not actually accomplishing anything, but he's just doing it, and he's having fun. Or kids chasing bubbles. You blow bubbles. They have these cool things now. They get these bubble guns. They just shoot out thousands of bubbles. And I do it out here, and my kids all run around trying to chase them. But what is it? It's nothing. It's emptiness. They can't grab any of those bubbles. As soon as you try to grab it, it pops. It's the same thing here, that it is a striving after the wind. It is, as he says, all breath. It is that breath, that emptiness, that not tangible thing that you can chase after, but you can't ever get it. It has nothing to grab. It is just this chasing after the wind. And however we think about it, that's it. It is this nothing thing. Our first parents in the garden were not satisfied with the kingdom that they had been given and thought they could attain an advantage by gaining wisdom and greater dominion by grabbing at the forbidden fruit. But instead of gaining more dominion, they ended up shepherding the wind, chasing wind, grabbing at wind. That's what this is. This is the result of this whole thing. In trying to get knowledge and trying to get understanding and trying to grab at something that was right there, they did exactly what we're all cursed to do now. They grabbed nothing because it was never there for them to take. The tree of the knowledge here is tied right into this verse here in verse 17. We have the word know used 3 times here. For I sought to know. I applied my heart to know wisdom and to know madness and perceived. And in Hebrew, to know. I knew that this was also a striving after the wind. The search for meaning in wisdom ends with breath. All human wisdom, everything that we bring to the table, everything that we as human beings could pursue, ends up as breath. It ends up as nothingness. And he sums this up by telling us that what is crooked cannot be made straight and what is lacking cannot be counted. These two proverbs. And what do we take away from that? It sounds weird, doesn't it? Well, what are we talking about here? The crooked things, well, the simple and profound ways of saying that some things in life are wrong. Some things in life are the way that they are. And the things that are the way they are, oftentimes we can't change it. Things that are the way they are in this world often cannot be changed by us. I can watch the news and I can see things unfold, but I can do nothing to change any of it. I can just sit by and watch. I can sit here and stare at this great big tree in our front yard, and I can see its crooked and bent branches, but I can do nothing to straighten them. I can see all the things that happen in the world, but I cannot do anything to change that thing. Ecclesiastes 7:13 echoes a similar idea by saying, consider the work of God. Who can make straight what he has made crooked? God is doing this stuff. God is the one who's in control. Can you make straight what he has made crooked? And this isn't necessarily a judgment call on the moral fabric of things. It's just saying the way that it is, can you change the way things are? By wisdom or by any of this, can you change the world? Can you change that? Ultimately, no. Life is what it is, and there's nothing we can do to fix it. We might not like to hear that, but again, Ecclesiastes is that real book that says this is what it is. It is what it is. And then he tells us here that by much wisdom, there's much vexation. Vexation is we don't talk about being vexed anymore. I was feeling really vexed the other day. But it's a frustration, right? That in much wisdom comes frustration. Because the more we know, the more we understand exactly what we don't know. So he says here that in much wisdom comes much frustration. And what is lacking cannot be counted. We thought as humans here, especially in our society, that if we got rid of God, we could be free. That if we could just put God away from our lives and put him over there on the back burner, out of sight, out of mind, that we could do whatever we wanted, that we could be free without God. But what has that gotten us? Human wisdom, human understanding, human pursuits of wisdom and power. What did that get us? I'm old enough to remember, at least the tail end of it, the Cold War, where our human pursuit, we through human wisdom, we cracked the power of the atom, and it almost eradicated all life on Earth. What do we do here? This much wisdom brings much frustration. The world of human thought and a human reasoning applied to the universe can bring nothing. Even the greatest minds suffer from this existential dread of knowing that their death is imminent and they have no answers. Human wisdom and understanding goes so far as to say that all of this is nothing, that we are nothing but cosmic accidents on a ball of rock around an average star in an inconceivably insignificant corner of the universe. And that our star, like the rest of the universe, will eventually fade in the eventual heat death of the universe, and that's that. It ends in cold and dark. Does knowing that bring anyone joy? No, that brings sorrow. That's why it says, in knowing much, that it brings sorrow, it brings pain. If that's where you think it ends, if by the pursuit of wisdom you think that's where it goes and that's it, that's not going to bring you happiness. There's no joy found there. All that's found there is emptiness and hollowness and pain, leads to much sorrow. So what do we conclude? What is the takeaway from all this depressing stuff? It's depressing, right? It is kind of sad and depressing. What do we take away from all this? The book ends by telling us at the end of Ecclesiastes that all these words come from one shepherd, we're told. One shepherd. We're told that in the end of it all, to trust God. In Ecclesiastes 12, 11, and 13, we're told that. And we might find that depressing, but the preacher is going to show us conclusively where true meaning can be found. If you could picture a room that is dark, a big, giant warehouse where there's all kinds of stuff, and there's lots of lights shining on all these different things, and we might say, oh, well, look at all this stuff in here. Ecclesiastes is walking through the warehouse and turning the lights off on all the things that are empty and hollow pursuits that are nothing. So that at the end of it all, when all the lights are turned off and all the rest of it, there's only one light shining over here, pointing to the true truth that is found in God. Because ultimately the pursuit and everything else is meaningless. And by taking our eyes off of, it's to say, no, it's not here, it's not here, it's not here, it's not there, it's not there, it's not there. And we're left with, well, then where is it? And it can only be God. If all that is under the sun is breath and empty and striving, where else can we look? If wisdom in the absolute pinnacle and peak of human wisdom cannot find the answers and the depth of that wisdom, where else can we look? We look to the one who came from heaven, who condescended to enter into the world of emptiness and vapor, who shattered the ceiling to come under the sun, to save those who are subjected to the futility of sin. Where is the greater wisdom? The greater wisdom is found in the one who crushes the wisdom of men, Jesus, the true wisdom of God. In 1 Corinthians 1:20, Paul says, where is the one who is wise? Where is the scribe? Where is the debater of this age? Has not God made foolish the wisdom of the world? And he goes on to say in 1 Corinthians 1:24-25 that Christ is the power of God and the wisdom of God. And that this wisdom from God is wiser than men. And it has come to crush the wisdom of men. It has come to crush it. And that's what it took, because the pursuit of wisdom of men could do nothing but find emptiness and vapor. It was the same pursuit from the garden, to grab at that tree, to get nothing but death and emptiness. It took the one coming to shatter through that ceiling into the world under the sun, the wisdom of God, to break that. Jesus related this as well. In Matthew 12:42, he said that the queen of the south will rise up in judgment with this generation and condemn it, because she came from the ends of the earth to hear the wisdom of Solomon. And behold, one greater than Solomon is here in Christ. Solomon was the pinnacle of human wisdom. Jesus is the embodiment of true wisdom, the true wisdom that doesn't come from mankind and our endeavors, but the wisdom that is from God, the greater wisdom. And that is the solution to the problem. Where is the answer to life, the universe, and everything found? It is found in Him. How do we ask the right question? We ask the right question by asking not what or why, but asking whom. Who is the wisdom? And that answer comes down to Christ. Christ is the very answer to the wisdom that we seek. Christ is the answer to life and everything. Because sin and because there is a God, He made us. God made the answer to us so that it could never be found in the pursuits that we could find, but it could only be found with Him. Sin made it so that we had to turn to Him. Peace and meaning in life can only and always only be found in Him, period. And so Ecclesiastes says, trust in Him, lean on Him. You want understanding, you want the answers to life? That's okay. Ask the big questions, but know that your answers are found in Him who died on the cross. That's where the answer is found. He is the answer. And in Him, you can have peace. In Him, you can have true something to grab onto that is more than breath and a chasing after the wind.